Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with my first impressions of the Spirit Torino Twin Pulse Ragnarr 1706 Special Edition. I think that's the longest name I've ever had on a headphone. Anyway, these are on loan to me for a review, and Spirit Torino comes from Italy, and this headphone here, I think this is pretty close to the top of their line, if not the top. And this headphone, the way it sits, retails at $3,750. It is a full-size, over-the-ear, dynamic driver design. And this headphone's a bit unique because it uses two drivers in each ear cup. I've never seen that before. And they're stacked on top of each other and wired in series in what's called an isobaric chamber. Because the two drivers are wired in series, the impedance of this headphone is 64 ohms. The sensitivity, I could not find that in the specifications, but I would say this headphone's relatively easy to drive. Probably not something you'd want to try to drive with a portable, but it's not going to take a whole lot of amp power to drive these. The weight of these, I'm not sure if I'm looking up the right headphone, because Spirit Torino has a lot of different headphones and a lot of different variations or different editions of each model. And from what I could see, they're claiming a weight of 460 grams on the Twin Pulse and 460 grams on the Ragnarr, but they're not this edition. And the way you can tell the 1706 edition is the fancy paint job on it. The Ragnarr edition, my understanding is it has larger or heavier or more powerful magnets. It's something to do with the magnets. Anyway, but this edition here, the one I have, and it's hard to get an exact weight because it does have a non-detachable cable, but as far as I can tell, without the cable being on the scale, the weight is 595 grams, which is significantly heavier than what their website says. They are a heavy headphone, there's no doubt about that. They're not the heaviest I've reviewed. The Kennerton Odin is a little bit heavier at, I believe, 620 grams, and the Urzatish Phobos is the heaviest at about 660 grams, I think, something like that. So, but it's one of the heavier headphones I've reviewed. So anyway, the headphone itself, the ear cups are entirely aluminum. The yokes are aluminum with looks like a steel shaft on it, and the blocks on the headband are aluminum. And the headband on this one, it looks like a leather on the inside and sort of a suede on the outside, and then the ear pads are leather around the back, and then on the side facing your ears, the inside and the face of these are sort of a velour material. I'm not sure exactly what it is. Anyway, it's very soft and very comfortable. The cable, which is probably about, a little over 2 meters long, I'd say maybe 7-8 feet long, is non-detachable, and I'm not crazy about that. I always liked headphones that had detachable cables, but I was told this has something to do with the two driver design, that it was necessary to go with a non-detachable cable. I'm not sure exactly why, but anyway, but you can see this is a very heavy cable. I mean, as far as thickness, I have actually never seen a headphone cable as heavy and thick as this one. And this one did come with a 4-pin XLR plug at the amp end, which I requested. But you can see the thickness of this cable. I've never seen a cable this heavy. It is nice though. It's soft and it's flexible and doesn't make any noise rubbing on itself. So it is a very nice cable in my opinion. Apparently this can be ordered with either the 4-pin XLR connection or a 6.3 standard single-ended plug, or that'd be a 1/4 inch. So anyway, I've given you a pretty good look at it. I wanted to talk about the comfort a little bit because it is a heavy headphone, but with the adjustments and all that, it is pretty comfortable. The ear pads are, it doesn't really feel like it's a completely sealing around my head, but that doesn't seem to matter. I'm not losing any bass or anything. In fact, I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But anyway, they don't really feel that heavy on my head. I mean, I can tell they're there, definitely, and it is a large headphone, but the clamping force is about right. They don't move around. I don't feel it squeezing on my head, and I've only had these, what have I had these now? About maybe 9 days, and I haven't had a whole lot of time to put on them yet, maybe 3 or 4 hours, and I probably haven't listened to them more than an hour at once, but I haven't had any issues with comfort. But if you've watched any of my videos, you know by now that heavy headphones don't really bother me. Heavy clamping force actually bothers me more than heavy headphones or non-comfortable pads. So if the pads are comfortable and the clamping force isn't bad, a heavy headphone really doesn't bother me. But anyway, I wanted to get into the sound a little bit. Like I said, I've only got maybe 3 or 4 hours on these, but this is just my first impressions, and I will do a full review on these in a couple of weeks if I'm allowed to keep them that long. So anyway, did want to get into the tone, and the tone balance I would describe as warm and bassy. This is not a neutral headphone. It's a little more neutral than the Torino I did my first impressions on a few days ago. That was a Super Leggera, and or Leggera, I'm not sure how that's pronounced. But anyway, this is a little closer to neutral, but still definitely has an emphasis in the bass. I would say the tone balance is a little bit V-shaped. Definite emphasis in the bass and a little bit of emphasis in the treble, or I could just say that the mid-range is set back a little bit, but you know, it would be kind of a lopsided V. Like the high side of the V would be the bass, then the mids would be the low point, and then the lower side of the V would be the treble. The treble sets a little bit higher than the mid-range, so I would say it's a V shape. The extension is good on both ends. They definitely have sub-bass, they definitely go low, and because there is a slight emphasis in the treble, the treble doesn't seem to roll off at all, and there is good extension into the higher frequencies. The bass is the strong point of this headphone. This headphone definitely has an emphasis on the bass. It is quite a bit more bassy than what I would consider neutral. I'm thinking probably at least, it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 9 decibels of bass emphasis above what would be neutral in my opinion, and a little less than on the Super Leggera. I would say a little less emphasis on the bass than that headphone, but still a very bassy headphone. I mean, definitely a lot of bass weight, and like the Super Leggera, it is very well controlled. I'm not hearing muddiness, I'm not hearing loose bass, I'm not hearing distorted bass. There's a lot of emphasis on the bass, but it is very clear and very tight. I mean, not perfect, but when you emphasize a bass like that, of course, it's going to, it's going to loosen up a little bit, but, I would say, in my opinion, it's very well controlled for how bassy it is. The mids are thick and rich, just the opposite of what I would consider thin. They are set back a little bit. Vocals, especially female vocals, seem to set back on the stage a little bit, not quite as present. The treble, I would say has a slight emphasis, and excuse me a second. would say the treble is well defined. It's clear, it's clean, it has a pretty good sparkle to it. And so yeah, I would say, you know, like I said, bit of a V shape to the tone balance. But anyway, getting into detail, I would say the detail is very good, but it's not the last word in detail. I mean, I could name half a dozen headphones that do have more detail, especially in the mid-range, but this headphone isn't lacking in detail, and I don't notice it until I compare it directly to something else. I mean, because of the price of this headphone, I did compare it directly to the Kennerton Thror, and the Kennerton Thror did have more detail in the mid-range. So, you know, this isn't the last word on detail, but until I compare it to something that is more detailed, and the Kennerton Thror is on the verge of being analytical. So, you know, so until I compare it to something like that, I'm really not missing it. I don't notice it. So I would say the detail is good on this headphone. The imaging is very pinpoint, like the Super Leggera. It just, I hear sounds and just, it almost sounds like it's coming from the room and not the headphone. I mean, it's just so pinpoint where sounds are coming from. The sound stage I would describe as large. It's not huge, but it has good width, good depth, and good height. The dynamics are very good on this headphone, especially in the bass. The bass is very punchy, very dynamic, has a lot of weight to it. I don't notice it being as dynamic in the mid-range or the treble, but the bass definitely has a lot of punch behind it. So overall, and once again, this is just my first opinions, I plan to put as much time in on this headphone as I can over the next couple weeks and put out a full review and get a lot deeper into the sound and compare it a little bit to different headphones. And I can only use this with 2 different amps right now because this did come with a 4-pin XLR. I have 2 choices right now. I have the Audio GD Master 9 with a balanced output, and I also have the head amp GSX Mini with a balanced output. So I have 2 very good amps for reviewing this headphone. So that's why I did request it with the 4-pin XLR connection. But like I was getting into is just overall kind of wrapping this up as a first impressions. I would call this headphone warm, it's bassy, and it's fun. It gives a lot of weight to thin sounding recordings, and it's very forgiving of less than perfect recordings. This is not an analytical headphone, and you don't have to search out your best recordings for it to sound good. I mean, I was listening to things like some old Fleetwood Mac, and just sounded really, really good. You know, stuff from like the 70s. And like I said, this isn't a headphone where you've got to search for your most perfect recordings to have it sound good. It sounds good with pretty much everything. And also, this is a headphone that's never going to cause listening fatigue because it's just kind of a laid back. The mid-range is set back a little bit, and just very smooth sounding headphones, so it's never going to wear out your ears. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. I'll try to give you more details in a couple weeks on my full review. In the meantime, once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video helped you, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you are all welcome to join us over at the Headphone Experience on Facebook. Thank you.